First of all, not every act that is terrifying is terrorism. When the FBI says this is being investigated as an act of terrorism, they're either telling us way too much, which is that it's associated somehow in the public mind with international terrorism, or they're telling us nothing at all, which is that they're not ruling out the possibility that there could be some connection. If it's an international terrorism, I mean, it's implausible, it seems to me, that Al-Qaeda or one of its franchises would target a gay nightclub in Central Florida. Now, we're told that this gentleman has leanings. If all that means is he doesn't like gay people, and ISIS doesn't like gay people, that, I'm sorry, is just not enough to establish leanings toward terrorism. So this would be an excellent time for everyone to take a deep breath.
Deep breath. On the politics, Juan, Donald Trump tweeting out already this morning, really bad shooting in Orlando, police investigating possible terrorism, many people dead and wounded. Whenever something like this happens, a massive event, a tragedy like this, and we'll get to the bottom of how and why it happened, it does change the dynamic politically and nationally about the conversation.
Yeah, it raises the temperature, and it raises the degree to which the American people feel that we need to do a better job of protecting the homeland and protecting Americans, but also going after the terrorists. I think that's why we saw this morning Senator Sessions here, I think, push a little precipitously towards the idea that it is a terrorist attack linked to Islamic extremism or Islamic radicalism.
I tried to...
Well, I appreciate it.
There.
We all saw that.
Yeah,
we appreciate that. But I think that that's why, you know, like there was a shooting at Love Field on Friday here in the United States. People initially think, oh my God, is this a terrorist incident at an airport? We are all sort of alert to this, especially in the political arena, because, again, if it happens, I think that you see Donald Trump and the Republicans have the sense that it would be to their advantage to say, you know what, President Obama and Hillary Clinton, as his former Secretary of State, have not done enough to go after ISIS and to wipe out the terrorist threat.
One thing, though, Brett, Senator Sessions said was this, his Judiciary Committee working on these numbers. 570, what he said, indictments or convictions of radical Islamists since 9/11. That seemed like a new number today.
Well, it might have been a new number, but, you know, this is what we're looking back, what, 15 years now. And that, you know, you think about it, it makes sense. I just think, you know, everybody's going to go to battle stations here on gun control and on the question of terrorism, and it's too soon to do that on either cause. And I think it'd be well to you know, kind of hold our fire here.
Julie?
I think that's right. We sort of get into these modes after these shootings where we immediately go to our corners. You have Republicans that will immediately stake out their positions in terms of what the administration is or is not doing on terrorism. You have Democrats that will immediately start calling for more gun control. And I think in some ways it has actually frozen our ability to do anything about these issues, because you do have people that go to their corners and there ends up being very little overlap in terms of what you could do to prevent both terrorism and just shootings that happen at a really alarming rate in this country.
George.
When the Egyptian airliner went down in the Mediterranean, America's foremost tweeter said instantly this was an act of terrorism. Now, maybe it was. I don't know if Mr. Trump was right about that, but 25 days have passed, and we still know absolutely nothing about what happened to that plane. So let's calm down.
Understand that we could take the pause, but if it turns out to be an effort of terrorism here on the homeland, it does dramatically potentially change the presidential race and the focus of the last few days.
Sure, but then the question is, we have to make distinctions, or the idea of terrorism becomes a classification that no longer classifies anymore. If this is some person deranged by his hatred of gay people, and he says, well, ISIS got that right, that doesn't make this into an international episode.
All right, turn to the politics of the past week. Donald Trump, how his week unfolded, even Sessions saying it was a pretty bad week.
Well, I think the effort at this juncture for Republicans should be to unify. And what we've seen to the contrary is Republicans coming apart, and largely in response to Donald Trump's comments about the Judge Curio, in which he said that you know, he's a Mexican, and I want to build a wall, and therefore there's some bias. And I think Republicans were wise to say that's not the way we think. We don't play identity politics like that on the conservative side. We usually leave that to the Democrats. And Donald Trump not only damaged himself in that way, but I think that when you start to hear Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, say that was textbook racism, usually Republicans like to say, you know, we have policy differences and we wish you Democrats would stop screaming racism. But there were a number of people in the Republican ranks this week who said, you know what, that's a step too far.
George. Well, Senator Sessions says it's a bad week because Mr. Trump got off message. This really is his message, which is a constant barrage of this sort of thing. Now, senior Republicans are going to him and saying, change your persona. It's like going to the Rolling Stones and telling Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, rock and roll has been very good to you, and you've been good at it, but it's time to go for chamber music. I don't think they do that, and I don't think he does that.
Brett, your thoughts of wrapping up this week?
Well, Trump now must appeal to a much larger universe of voters than he did during the primary season. And he seems not to recognize what that means. And what it means is that you simply have to be very careful and disciplined in what you say. And as George suggests, it may not simply be in the man to do that. We will see. But, you know, these kind of reactions to things, this is a personal reaction to what he claims as unfair rulings by a judge, and he shot from the hip, and it worked like crazy, this sort of stuff during the primary season. It will not work during a general election when you need to gather in people who previously weren't for you. It's as simple as that. And he needs to recognize that and act accordingly if he can.